That was more than one ticket.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, we're going to get started in a few minutes. If you could just move in to fill in some of the seats and leave the aisle seats empty for anybody that's straggling in, okay? There are some seats up here. Okay, good morning. I'm Ms. Weinberg. I'm the librarian here, and it is my honor and privilege to bring to the school today a survivor of the Holocaust, Eddie Fisch, and he's going to address you in a moment. Before I do that, I'm going to introduce you to Alan Weiner from the Neuberger Holocaust Education Center.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Alan Weiner, and I'm a Holocaust Education Week volunteer. The 38th Annual Neuberg Holocaust Education Week runs from November 1st to 8th. It is presented by the Sarah and Chaim Neuberger Holocaust Education Center, which runs Holocaust education programs throughout the year. Welcome to this morning's event. I'd like to thank Vaughan Secondary School for hosting this program. We will first view a short film to provide the background needed to understand the testimony we're going to hear. Then you will learn about personal experiences, sacrifices, courage shown, and events that shaped the lives of those who survived this difficult period, and of those who did not. You are a privileged group. As Holocaust survivors become older, there will be fewer opportunities to hear these stories directly from the people that experienced this horrific period in human history. At this point, I'd like to remind you to silence your cell phones. After the program, you can send a tweet or post a message on social media about something you have found particularly important. You can find us on Facebook as Neuberger Holocaust Education Center and on Twitter and Instagram as Holocaust_Ed. I hope you'll find this program to be thought-provoking and informative. Thank you.
I'm going to read you a little bit of a biography of Mr. Fisch, and I will then introduce him to you, and you will get to hear him speak. Eddie Fisch was born in Budapest, Hungary on January 16, 1933. His family lived in Hungary for many generations, and his grandfather was a decorated veteran in World War I. Though there have always been anti-Semitism, there are many restrictions that were placed on Jews practicing certain trades and professions, and they lived in relative peace in Hungary before the war. The German army occupied Hungary in March 1944. At that time, his father, who had been forced into a labor camp since 1942, was taken to the Russian front and never heard from again. His mother was rounded up by the Nazis and sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau. She survived and returned 18 months later. In 1944, Eddie was 11 years old, and his brother Leslie was 9. They moved in with their grandparents and stayed with them until October 1944, when the Hungarian fascist Arrow Cross militia arrested and murdered his grandfather. His brother and him found safety in Swiss safe houses for a few days at a time, but they had to keep moving in fear that the Arrow Cross would discover his location. They were eventually discovered and marched to the Danube River, where thousands of Hungarian Jews were killed. They were shot into the Danube. They ran off and managed to find their grandmother and spent the last months of the war living in a basement in the Budapest ghetto he spent time with his brother and grandmother. He was liberated by the Soviet Army in January 1945. In 1948, Eddie came to Canada, where he met his wife, Sylvia. They live in Toronto, and they have 2 children, and 5 wonderful grandchildren. Introduce to you Eddie Fisch. Eddie would like you to ask him some questions at the end. So he's going to speak. I'm going to show a PowerPoint. He's going to talk about what you're seeing. And then he's going to tell his story, and he welcomes your questions. So please don't be shy.
No, of course. So that's you as a child?
That's me, yeah, today. Back of Europe. Yeah, small landlocked country. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Those are my grandparents. Put myself in your mouth. Sorry. So my parents, my brother Leslie passed away 20 years ago, and myself, my father was taken to the labor camp in April 1944. I remember. Actually, we did, and I'll tell you the story how that happened. The school I went to, top row, about 48 of us in one class. So my teacher, Mr. Tanner, wonderful teacher, beautiful person, survived the war, and he ended up in Israel. And the other kids in the school, in this class, that also ended up here in Toronto. Fortunately, I'll come now. Thanks. That's the building that I lived in. The flat with the open door is the flat that I lived in. It was there were 6 of us, my grandparents, my parents, my brother, and I lived in there. It's a room and a kitchen, cold water, bathrooms, toilets were in the corner there. And we had to use it, we had to go there, and unfortunately, sometimes we found some unwanted visitors there, 4-legged ones. We also had some relatives sometimes come up and visit us from the country, and they also stayed with us. It was pretty crowded, but everybody had the same thing, so we sort of used to it. Nobody had it any better. We were pretty poor, so nobody had it any better. That's the Danube. That's the Danube River. And those are bronze shoes embedded in the pavement there, and it's to remind people of what the Hungarian Holocaust Nazis did. They would take marks of Jewish people down to the back of the river, tie 2 people together, and shoot one, and as he was falling into the river, he would pull the other one in with him to drown. They got rid of thousands and thousands of Jews in that fashion. And as I said, those were the shoes to remind people what happened. It's part of the ghetto that we were told to move into around October of 1944. And it was a small area, about 3 blocks by 4 blocks. It usually would hold maybe 30,000, 40,000 people. That there were about 200,000 Jews murdered in there, and lived in the Russian army liberated on January 1940. Everybody lived in the cellar because about 2 days after we moved into the ghetto, the bombing started very, very right. The Allies, the Russians, and the Americans.
No, that's not.
Oh, it's not working. Is it working now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So about 2 days after we moved into the ghetto, everybody moved on into the cellar. And we all lived there until the Russians liberated us. The building itself got hit by 14 bombs and 15 mortar shells. But a huge building, so we survived. That's the ship I came to Canada with in 1948. It's the USS General W.C. Langford, an Army ship. That's 8 days. Very, very bad weather, really bad weather. Fortunately, I was able to cope with it, and I met a very nice African-American sailor. His name was, believe it or not, George Washington, and he fed me tomato juice and oranges, and I was never sick. Most people on the ship were very sick. When we got off the ship, he gave me 25 cents, and that's the money I came to Canada with. I told myself that I'm gonna have that 25 cents forever, and I had it until I saw my first Eskimo pie ice cream. I never saw one of those before, so that they were in the 20, actually it was only 15 cents. That's my wife and I got married in 1955. Still married, thank God. Just think of that. That are my kids. A number of years ago, I got involved with Israeli Army, the IDF, and we were raising funds for educational and recreational purposes. These two gentlemen were at different times the chiefs of staff of the Israeli Army. Later on, both of them became ministers of defense. A wonderful opportunity for me to be able to do something for the Israeli Army. Israel is a very, very important part of being Jewish. With what happened to us over the generations, over history, it's very good for us to know. It's very important for us to know that there's a state of Israel. Even though I think there's no better country in the world than Canada, we're very, very lucky to be able to live in this country, have the opportunities this country allows us to have, and couldn't be more grateful and thankful for the fact that I was able to come here and live here. That's just some trophies, but some things that I got for doing what I did. My son and his family, his son Aaron and his daughter Sidra, my daughter and my granddaughter's bat mitzvah. You know what that is? Anytime I say something you don't understand, you don't know, you're not familiar with, please put up your hands and I'll try to explain it. Jewish tradition, when a girl gets to be 12, she becomes an adult, and a boy gets to be 13, he becomes an adult. And there's a celebration for that. And my son, his wife, and 2 children, this was on a cruise ship. Thank you. First and foremost, I want to thank the school. This is fine. Thank you. I want to thank the school for inviting us, and I want to thank you young people for taking the time and coming here. It really is very important for you to learn about what happened, to try and see that it's really up to you to see that it never happens again. Unfortunately, there are too many problems in the world today to hear about these atrocities that are happening in the United States and even some here. So again, as I said, it's important for you to know that this is up to you to make sure that these things don't happen again. As it was said before, I was born in Budapest in 1933, and you're very intelligent kid, you know how old I am now. We were very poor. As I showed you, we lived in a flat, small flat, really small flat. There were 6 of us living there, and sometimes we had guests coming, 2 more people, sometimes even more. We also rented out a Murphy bed, a fold-up bed, to a couple that came at night, slept there, folded it up in the morning, and went to work. So there were really 8 people living in a small flat, cold water. Again, the bathrooms were outside, but we managed because everybody in our circles was the same situation. My grandparents had a little fruit stand on the street corner in Budapest. My grandfather would get up in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, go to the market to buy the fruit, bring it in, and we'd stand there all day long selling the fruit. And I went to school. In the summertime, I helped my grandparents at the stand. My dad would go around to tailor shops and pick up the cuttings. And at the end of the day, he would take it to a wholesaler and they would work it up into whatever they worked it up into. I say this for you to understand that we were very poor. There was really nothing that the Nazis or later on the Hungarian Arrow Cross Party, which was a really scourge for society, wanted from us. There was absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, after the Russians liberated us, my grandmother and I went back to our flat, and it was left the same way as we left it, because there was nothing worthwhile there for anybody to take. I went to school. I went to an Orthodox school. My grandparents insisted on me learning about Jewish history, Jewish religion, and my father was taken into the forced labor camp as early as 1942 because Hungary was allied with Germany. The Jewish people in Budapest were really not bothered too much. However, in the countryside and in villages and towns, they were rounded up as early as 1942. Privileges were taken away from them. They weren't allowed to go to school. They had a quota where it was only 5% of the population that were Jewish was able to go to school. And things were really, really made very, very difficult. For that reason, a lot of the Jewish people from the countryside moved up to Budapest because, again, because Hungary was allied with Nazi Germany, they didn't bother people in Budapest too much. However, in 1942, in a little, beautiful little place called Wannsee, just outside of Berlin, Germany, they had a meeting how to get rid of all the Jews, how to kill all the Jews, how to murder all the Jews. It wasn't a discussion as to should it be or shouldn't be. The discussion went on as to how. The people there were 15 people there, all educated people, doctors, lawyers, high-ranking army officers. At the end of the meeting, it was decided what to do with the Jews. And a man named Adolf Eichmann, who was a colonel in the German army, was given the task of getting rid of all the Hungarian Jews in March of 1944. Hitler found out that the regent of Hungary, which is the prime minister of Hungary, wanted to make peace with the Russians. So he called him, he invited him to Berlin, and while he was in Berlin, the German army invaded Budapest, invaded Hungary. And very soon after that, Adolf Eichmann came in. He came with 200 Nazi SS soldiers to help him in his task. But he had all the help from the Hungarian Nazis that were very, very anti-Semitic. We got a phone call from my dad that he was being taken to the front, and with my mother, please bring him some warm clothes that he would need. My mother collected whatever clothes he had and went down to the railroad station the following day. This was March the 21st, 1944, where she was picked up by the Nazis and initially taken to a brick factory just outside of Budapest, where she was held for about 6 weeks, and then taken to Auschwitz. And we never heard from her practically until she came home. As it turned out, my father was not taken to the front at that time. He was able to come back a couple of times still, until on April when he was taken. And the only time we heard from him, we got a couple of postcards from him that everything is being good, everything is well. However, after the war was over and the people that survived his camp came back, told us that the Nazis made all the Jewish forced labor inmates to write postcards. They held on to it and they sent it to the families to make the families believe that the people were okay, even though they probably were not even alive by that time. In any case, unfortunately, we never heard from my dad again. In October of 1944, again, the region of Hungary decided that the war was lost, and again, he was put in under house arrest, and the Hitler the Nazis gave the rule of Hungary over to a very, very rabidly anti-Semitic faction called the Arrow Cross, and they took power. This was on the 15th of October 1944. We were told that all of us have to wear a yellow star to designate that we're Jews. We had a curfew that we only could go out between 11 and 3 in the afternoon. Anybody found before or after was subject to beatings or worse. The Arrow Cross people, I use that word advisedly, would walk around on the street, walk into buildings, pull out Jewish people. The houses were marked that this is a Jewish house. Jews live here, and they would line them up and shoot them. They put them in trucks, take them down to the Danube. There was a defrocked Roman Catholic priest. He was defrocked, and he used to say that my mission from God is to kill Jews. And he would go in a big truck, pull up in front of buildings, take out all the Jews, take them down to the Danube, never to be heard from again. On the 20th of October, 1944, they came into the building that we lived in, and they said, all Jewish men between 16 and 60, come down. My grandfather was 2 weeks away from being 60 years old. His birthday would have been yesterday. And they took him, and again, never to be heard from again. We heard from a gentleman who escaped from that brick factory, and he told us that they made the people get undressed naked so they shouldn't be able to escape, even if they tried or wanted to. And I guess my grandfather must have been one of those people that was kept there, but we never heard from him again. And just as a very important, my grandfather was such a wonderful, wonderful person. As I told you before, he had a little fruit stand on the street corner. And he lost an eye in the First World War. And he was a veteran. And one day a man came up and called him a dirty Jew, which was not unusual for people to be called dirty Jews or beaten up. But this man called my grandfather a dirty Jew. And there was a Gentile lady who was a regular customer. She was a big lady. And she took this man and knocked him to the ground and really beat him up until the police came and pulled her off him. He says, how can you talk like this to this man? You know who he is. He's a fine, fine person, which he truly was. Food was very scarce. We all had food stamps, but there was no foods in the stores for us to eat. We couldn't walk on the streets because, as I said, the Arrow Cross would see a Jew or anybody they thought was a Jew and beat him up or kill him, really kill him. Towards the end of October, we got a notice from the government, the Arrow Cross government, that every one of us all the Jews would have to move into this ghetto. The ghetto was, as I said earlier, about 3 blocks by 4 blocks, and about 200,000 Jewish people that were at that time in Budapest had to move in there. They put up barriers, and there was a guard at every gate, so nobody could go out. Food, we had food. There was a soup kitchen that was about a block away from where we were, and the kids would take a little 4-wheel wagon. The adults were too afraid to go out, and the kids would take a little 4-wheel wagon. We'd go get the food, and because I was only 11 years old at the time, they gave me 2 ounces of cornbread, which I shared with my grandmother. We tried to go out and scrounge food wherever we could, and some of my trips outside the building, there was a lady once, I saw her from about a block away, and she was talking to this Arrow Cross guard. I don't know what she was saying because she was far away, but all of a sudden I saw this man grab the baby out of her hand and slam it against the wall. She was screaming and yelling, grabbed the baby and ran away. Another time, there was about 3 Arrow Cross people, pretty drunk, went into a building. Whoever was there, men, there were about 20, 24 people, men, line them up against the wall and just shot them. Just shot them because they were Jews. They would come into the buildings, take out people, and beat them up. And we lived in that and if you can imagine a cellar, it was not a cellar like a cellar here in Canada. It was more like a food drum. And again, food we didn't have, and every minute we had to worry that they're gonna come and kill us and beat us up. If there was such a thing as hell on earth, these few weeks that we had to spend in the ghetto, worrying every minute about the Arrow Cross murderers, that was hell on earth. Fortunately, before we moved into the ghetto, I'm sorry if I'm rambling on my dates, but it's not getting easier. Before we moved into the ghetto, we found out that the Swiss and Swedish governments bought some buildings outside the ghetto area, and they brought kids up to 18 years old to be safe from the Arrow Cross or from the Nazis. One night, I took my brother. I was 11, he was 9. I remember it was pouring rain, and we found one of these homes, and knocked on the gates, and they let us in. We stayed there for a few days, and these houses, you have to understand, it was like an embassy, and an embassy in international law is not allowed for anybody to come in unless they get permission from the government that owns these buildings, owns these embassies. But they didn't care. They came in, and we got noted. We got advice that they were coming in to get us. So they lined us up, and they took us to another home. And from that home, I ran away, and I went to my grandmother because her and I were always very close. My brother stayed, and the day when we moved into the ghetto, he showed up, and he said that the Arrow Cross was coming in again into that house that they were in, and they were taking him down to the Danube, and he and 4 other kids ran away, and they were lucky enough to be able to get away. At that time, we had some friends, a non-Jewish lady, who we've known for many, many years. And she said that she's gonna take my brother, because he didn't look very much Jewish, not like me. And she was gonna take care of him, and she did. And he lived out the ghetto times in her apartment outside the ghetto. After the Russians liberated us, he came back. And again, as I said, we moved back into my grandmother's flat. But again, just so you kids know, there were a lot of non-Jewish people that at the risk of their lives, the risk of the lives of their family, would help us, would help Jewish people. If a Nazi or an Arrow Cross person would find out, a Gentile, that was helping Jews, he was up to get the same treatment as if he was Jewish. They would kill him or shoot him or take him to jail or do whatever. So they really took their lives into their own hands and risked their families' lives. But there were a number of people that did that, quite a number of people. And it's today in Jerusalem, there's an avenue that's called the Avenue of the Martyrs, and with a little plaque with their names to show that these were the righteous among the nations by helping Jews, by saving Jews. A lot of people, some in Hungary, a lot in Poland, Holland, almost every country. There were some places only one, some places many. There were Swedes, Swedish embassy, the Swiss embassy, Japanese, Italian, very, very good people. Again, at the risk of saving, at the risk of their own lives, they helped saving Jews. On the 18th of January, 1945, heard some noises outside the building, and we peeked out and we saw some very funny-looking people that we knew were Hungarians. And slowly we opened the gates, and there were the Russian army, and there was a Russian soldier pulled up in front of our gate, horse and buggy, and he had loaves of bread. He started slicing it and throwing it into the crowd. Everybody was happy to get a slice of bread that we didn't have for a long, long time. And As far as I'm concerned, the Russians gave me back my life, and I'm forever grateful to them. Don't get into politics, but to me, they're good people. I probably lost a lot of my memories, or haven't said too much of it. If anybody has any questions, please ask me, and I'll be trying to answer anybody at all. Always hard to get the first one, but after that, it gets easier and easier. Nobody? Yes, sir.
What were the neighbors like in your apartment building? Anybody else injured?
That's my son. There was a family living next door to us. I remember the name was King in Hungarian, but it translated into King. And they were also always very friendly to my grandmother. And they would come in and borrow $1 or a cup of sugar or whatever. When the arrow crossed the over, they would come in and just take it. They didn't ask, they just take it because they were allowed to by their laws. And they knew that there was nothing that anybody can do about it. They would just take it. Yes, young lady.
How do you think that?
You have to speak up, please, because I'm a little older than you.
How do you think that we stop it? Never happened.
I hate to put this on you, but it's up to you. There's so much trouble in this world, so much anti-Semitism. I hate to bring this up, but you must have all heard of what happened in Pittsburgh just last week, where a crazed man walked into a synagogue doing services and murdered 11 people for no reason at all, except that they were Jewish. It's not gonna have to be up to people like you to stand up. A bully is only a bully until you start pushing back. If any one of you sees anybody against a Muslim, against a black, against a Jew, against anybody, please stand up for them, because that bully is, again, only a bully. You all heard about the schoolyard bully. If you push back, they'll stop. They'll run away faster. It's a bad world today. There are too many problems in this world. We're, again, as I said, we're very lucky to live in this country because we have rules and laws and regulations that allow us to live as free people, to talk as free people, to move around as free people. But as always, there's some very, very bad people. And if we don't stand up to them and show them that we're better than they are, we're bigger than they are, and we're even stronger than they are, they'll back off. Yes, young lady.
Do you still hold a lot of resentment?
I'm sorry.
Speak up, speak up.
Do you still hold a lot of resentment and anger towards what happened?
Do I still go?
Like, do you still have a lot of anger towards what happened? Or
To be very frank with you, I learned from my grandfather, who was a really fine person. I don't blame the sons for the sins of their fathers. I know that a lot of people are very angry at what their fathers or grandfathers did during that time. And they're very sorry and very regretful for that. There are still some that would like to have the same thing come back. I don't think I'd like to hate anybody. You know, it's a joke, but I say, if you want to hate something, hate broccoli. Don't hate people. If I did something to you, and think about this, because I truly believe that it's so. If I did something bad to you, and you don't want to like me, you want to dislike me, or even hate me, but don't hate all Jewish people because I did what I did, or a Muslim, or a black, or anybody else. It's, you know, if you hate somebody, if you think about it, you hate. Who does it hurt? It hurts yourself because you have that hate inside of you that maybe eats you up. And I don't even know that you hate me. Yes, yes, just speak up, please. Yes, I have. I went back, for a number of reasons. I went back because I wanted my family to see where I was from. I went back because I wanted to go back to the places where my father and grandfather took me. And I also went back to see how smart I was for leaving.
There was a question over here.
Yes.
Um, what was it like coming to like Canada and an unknown country?
Well, that's a whole another book. It was when my mother came back from Auschwitz, she was not the same person as when she left, physically or mentally. And in 1945, 46, I decided that I wanted to go to Israel. And I left I went with a group. It was all illegal. We had to cross all the borders from Hungary to Austria. And Austria at that time was split up into 4 different zones: the British, the French, the Russian, and the American. So every zone was like a border, and we had to sneak across every one of them until I got to a camp that would make arrangements for people to go to either Australia, Canada, or the United States. I was there for a while, and then I heard what was going on in Israel, and I said, no, just went through a war. I don't want to go to another war. I went back to Hungary. When I got back, I found out that my kid brother, who was at that time 11 years old, decided that he's going to follow me, and he left. And I didn't want him to go, so I went back again, went through the whole thing. I went with a friend of mine and my second cousin, and I found my brother after about 3 or 4 months. We went from camp to camp to camp until I finally found him. And we went into a camp. We stayed there for a while. And again, we decided that we want to go back to our mothers. And we did, but my cousin stayed, and he eventually came to Canada. And he kept writing us letters, what a good country this was. And so again, I told my mother, I said, you know what, I want to go to Canada. And again, I left with a couple of friends, just 2 or 3 of us. And we went through all these different zones, these different borders. And we got into a camp, and we made arrangements to, with the different organizations, different embassies. We had to go to a number of checks, physical checks, make sure that we weren't sick or we weren't dangerous, even though we're only about 14, 15 years old. So we finally got our documents through the Canadian Jewish Congress, and they took us to Frankfurt, and we took that ship that I showed you that brought us to Canada. And when I got to Canada, they put us into a home, and they paid for my upkeep for 2 weeks, and I got a job for $18 a week, fixed salary. And I paid $15 for room and board, and 30 cents was the unemployment insurance. I had $2.70, and 50 cents was for my car fare, that $2.20 every week to live on. But we managed, and I had one job and another job and another job. I drove a taxi. I worked in a tobacco farm. I worked on the railroads. I did many things until finally I found something that was good to me, and I was able to become successful. And again, as I said, only in Canada could I have gotten the opportunities and the help that I've had. And the help I had was my wife, man upstairs. Yes, sir. I'd like to hear from a young man already.
How was it, Ghetto?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, speak loud.
Did you make any friendships?
Did I make any friendships here in Canada? In the ghetto? Well, it was very difficult because we were too afraid to go outside. The only time we went outside is to be able to get the food, which was twice a week. We went to the soup kitchen, but there were no friendships, no. Unfortunately, we were all worried about staying alive. Yes,
How the Jewish community receive you?
I'm sorry.
How the Jewish community receive you?
How did the Jewish community receive you?
How did I what?
How did the Jewish community receive you when you came?
Oh, the Jew, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. It's one of my other problems that I had besides getting old. The Jewish community, again, I guess going through the war and going through being on my own for so long, I really didn't depend on anybody. I truthfully didn't. I'm not trying to be any kind of a big shot or anything like that, but I remember going to the Canadian Jewish Congress and I told my social worker that I only have $2.20 a week and it's really not enough to live on. And she said, well, we'll give you another 50 cents a week. So I said, no, thank you, I don't want it. And I never went back. But I never had any problems with the Jewish community. And hopefully they never had any problems with me. But I never went to anybody for anything. I really didn't. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe I should have. But eventually things turned out okay, so I'm not sorry that I didn't. But I can't say anything bad about the Jewish community. Yes?
Have you feel about what happened in Pittsburgh?
Very sad. Very, very sad. It's a terrible thing when a man decides that he wants to murder people that he doesn't know, that he has nothing to do with, only because they're Jews. I hope we can stop it. I don't know if we can, but I hope we can stop this from ever happening again. Yes,
Where did you meet your wife?
we lived next door, and she decided I was the best thing ever happened to her, so she married me. And can't say she lied. You wanna? Yes, yes, sir.
Why would people decide to murder Jews?
If you can tell me that, if anybody has an answer to that, it would be the greatest discovery the world has ever known. I don't know why. The population of the world is approximately 70 billion. The Jewish people comprise less than 0.2%. And we have done, in all honesty, without tooting our own horn, truthfully, we have done so much good in the world. The little country of Israel today delivers so much good to the rest of the world in medicine, in high tech, in agriculture, in so many different things, helping third world countries, African countries. We've had people like Einstein, we have people like Freud, we have people like Jonas Salk. We have so many great discoveries by Jewish people. I don't know why. I truly don't know why. As I said before, you want to hate somebody for doing something bad to you. Maybe you're right. I don't think so, but maybe you're right. But to hate a whole nation, a whole group of people, I don't know. I wish I could have an answer for it. It would probably be a Nobel Prize. Yes.
Do you ever lose hope?
Hope. Like this man upstairs, why should I lose hope? He's good to me. I don't lose hope. Things will get better. Glass is always half full. Don't lose hope. Yes.
Did your kids grow up knowing how you grew up?
I'm sorry?
Did your kids grow up with knowing how you grew up?
Did you share your experience as a child with your own children?
Did I tell my experience? Yes, I did. I told them, I think they know it better than I do. I even wrote a book, which is not a very good book, but I got a book. If Alan hadn't picked me up, I would have one now in my car, but he was nice enough to pick me up, so I haven't got one to leave here. But yes, they do, and that's why I took them back to Hungary to know, and that's why we go to Israel to learn what we are, what we can do, what we should do. Just as an aside, we were in Israel with my son and his wife last year, And we went into a place called Innovations Israel. Believe it or not, they have discovered a way to get water out of air. If there's as much as 20% humidity in the air, they make water out of it. And they have machines that manufacture, so to speak, this water. And they give these machines to countries that are very arid, that have no water, and it's a tremendous, tremendous help to them. Yes.
Was there any hospitals in the Holocaust?
Hospitals? No, there were no hospitals. What we did is, again, as the kids, because only the kids were not able, but were brave enough, if you will, to go out on the streets. One of the jobs we had was clearing the streets from the rubble and clearing the streets from the dead people. What we would do is we just pull them inside the doorways, and every once in a while they come with a cart and they load them on the cart and they take them out and they put them in a mass grave. And after the war was, after the Russians liberated us, there was a park not too far from the ghetto gates, and they were digging up these mass graves, people that just killed or died from bombing or died from being murdered by the Arrow Cross. But there were no hospitals. Not at all. Yes? I can see your hand.
How did you cope with losing family?
How did I cope with losing family? That's a good question. I really don't know. I guess I was too young, maybe to know enough. Maybe I'm just lucky to have been able to get over it. I get over it is the wrong word to say it, because I'm still not over it. As I said, it was my father's and grandfather's birthday yesterday, and it still hurts because they were good people. My grandfather taught me a word. It's a Jewish word, it's an easy word. It's called mensch. A mensch means somebody that's an ethical, honest, up to date, upstanding person. And he always said to me, try to remember the word. And if you can, try to be that mensch. So that's a word I'd like you to learn. You try to be that mensch. It's a beautiful word. It means a lot. Yes, Yendi.
How did seeing so many people die around you affect you as you were growing up?
How did what?
How did it affect you when you were growing up and you saw so many lose their lives? How did it affect you?
How did it affect me?
Yeah.
Again, I don't know how to answer it except to say that I was very lucky. My mother, may she rest in peace, she followed us here 2 years later. So it made things a little easier. At least I had my mother. And my grandmother also followed us another year later. So and my brother was alive, and my second cousin. So I had a little bit of a family. Unfortunately, now I don't have them, but I do have my own family. I have my wife, my kids, my grandkids, and a great grandson. And I guess you're lucky. Some people, it affects much more, and some people can cope with it much more. And some people, I have friends that still have nightmares over it. And they're in their 80s or maybe even 90s and still have nightmares over it. It's just a matter of luck. People sometimes ask me about believing in God, and I keep telling him I never saw God holding a gun, so I don't blame God. God gave us a brain to do it the best we can, and hopefully we do. Unfortunately, some of us don't. But I'm lucky. Yes?
Where was your wife during the war?
Good place in Toronto. Anybody else? Yes?
Did you ever get severely injured?
Did I ever
Get injured severely?
injured? No, I didn't. Again, it's a matter of luck. I remember standing in the courtyard in the ghetto where I lived, and I looked up, and there was something falling towards me. I was so stuck, I couldn't move. I was lucky it fell down beside me. If it would hit my head, I wouldn't be here. It was a huge empty shell. It was just coming from the air someplace. I don't know where it was coming from, but I was very lucky. Again, told you I got a good friend upstairs. I wish I could hear.
Did you bring anything back from Europe when you came to Canada?
Did I bring anything back from Europe?
What did you bring with you? Photographs, books?
No, I have some pictures. I have some of the Bibles that my grandfather gave me. I had a prayer shawl that my grandfather gave me for my bar mitzvah, which he gave it to me before, and I gave it to my grandson. And that's all. Just the 5 books of Moses I had, and a prayer book, and the prayer shawl, and some pictures. Not too many. Anybody else? Yes.
Did people get injured during the Holocaust?
An awful lot of people got injured during the Holocaust. Injury was the best thing that could happen to them, instead of getting killed and murdered. You people have no idea, and you shouldn't have any idea, just how bad things were, how bad, unfortunately, people can become, how vicious and ugly people can become. To think that anybody can have that much hate inside of them, it's just very, very difficult for me, and I'm sure a lot of people do imagine why they would do it. I know a lot of people did it for money, because they were able to get the assets of the Jews that never came back. Again, as I said, we were so poor that there was nothing that they could take from us that was worthwhile. But there were a lot of people. There was an agency that went around to the wealthier Jewish families and took an inventory of the assets to make sure that they don't take anything away. When we had this order to move into the ghetto, one of the things that the order had is that if there's anybody, any professionals that are Jewish people that are moving into the ghetto, and any equipment like dentists or doctors, or whatever kind of equipment, and if they find it damaged, they will be held responsible, even if that whatever article was would have been damaged a year or 5 years prior. But they would hold the people that owned it responsible, because they would say that they damaged it, so somebody else shouldn't have it. But it was just a time that, God forbid, should ever come again.
As a result of all the things you heard throughout the Holocaust and seeing what's happening, do you have any optimism?
Do I have any what?
Optimism.
Optimism? Well, I believe in God, and I believe in people. And hopefully people will find out that we're far better off as people, we're far better off as a world if we stick together and don't hate each other, and maybe not love each other, maybe that's too much to expect, but to get along with one another, because we can all help each other. One way or another, something will come up that you'll need me or I need you. And if we can get along, we're far better off. And hopefully somebody will come along in this world that will bring that home to people and make the world better. That's it.
Questions?
I don't know.
Well, maybe they want to come and speak to you privately after, if that's okay with you.
Thank you very much for coming again. I appreciate it.
We want to thank Eddie for for speaking so freely and answering all our questions today. We have a small token of appreciation and thank you, and a donation to the Holocaust Education Center in your honor. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Eddie will be here if you want to come up and ask him something privately.
Anybody,
Thank you.
anything? Just don't ask me for money. Anybody?